relationship with depression. This is a study that I worked on as part of the requirements for getting the MBCHB degree in the University of Ghana Medical School. Okay, so my outline today will be as follows. We'll look at the background to the study. We'll look at bullying types, the subjects of my study, study methodology, the results, some conclusion statements, some recommendations and acknowledgements. Okay, so the health behavior in school-age children under the WHO defines bullying as a systematic abuse of power, where the aggressive behavior or intentional harm doing by peers is carried out repeatedly and is characterized by an imbalance of power, either actual or perceived, between the victim and the bully. Now, the important things I want us to note from this definition, is a lengthy one, are that bullying is an intentional act. It is meant to cause harm. It is an act that is carried out repeatedly or multiple times, and it's usually characterized by an imbalance of power, whether that imbalance is actual or perceived. Now, bullying is not just limited to any country or group of people. Bullying is a worldwide phenomenon. It has been around for generations, and it's commonly seen amongst children of school-going age. And this is especially so for adolescents. So you see it mostly in junior high schools, senior high schools. And when we think of bullying, we think of two main groups, the perpetrators and then the victims. However, in recent times, there's been an emergence of a third group known as the bully victims. And bully victims are people that were initially victims of bullying and later on became perpetrators of bullying. Now, bullying has a negative impact on both the victim and the perpetrator, so it's not limited to just the victim. And these effects or impact can be long-term, it can be short-term. Also, bullying can give off symptoms which may be internal or external. Internal being things like anxiety, depression, and external being aggression. Some types of bullying, as described by the HBSC under the WHO, it grouped bullying into four main categories. So we have physical bullying, verbal bullying, bullying through social exclusion, and bullying through the damage of property. Then we look at some risk factors or causes of bullying. And we see that a study done by Singer et al. Showed that some genetic influences accounted for about 2/3 of the variation of exposure to bullying. That is, being bullied was influenced by some pre-existing heritable individual vulnerabilities. We also see in two studies, one by Aqua et al. In 2014 and another by Korle-Bu et al. In 2018, which showed a link between bullying and exposure to family violence. So the aim of my study was to determine the effects of bullying among senior high school students in Ghana. And my objectives were to assess the prevalence of bullying among senior high school students, to determine gender differences in bullying victimization, to determine the type of bullying that is more common among male and female senior high school students, to determine the prevalence of bully victims, to also determine the presence of psychological effects of bullying on the perpetrators, and to explore the relationship between bullying and depression in both the victims and the perpetrators. So my study sought to answer the questions: what gender is more affected by bullying? What types of bullying are perpetrated by male and female senior high school students? What are the effects of bullying on senior high school students? And how does bullying relate to the development of depression among the students? So the study was initially planned to be at two senior high schools, that is St. Mary's, which is a girls' school, and Accra Academy Senior High School, it's a boys' school, in both of which were in Accra. Now, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which led to the closure of schools, I had to convert to an online format using Google Forms. And this made senior high school students from any part of Ghana eligible to take part in the study, provided they had internet access. So for my research design, this study was a cross-sectional one. It involved the use of standardized questionnaires. So I used the Always Bully Victim questionnaire for students and the Patient Health Questionnaire 9 to assess depression. And my population, as I said earlier, were all available senior high school students with access to an online platform where they could access the questionnaire. And I used a convenience sampling method. So my inclusion criteria was male and female senior high school students, participants willing to provide consent for the study, participants that had internet access. For my exclusion criteria, I used students who are not currently in senior high school or had dropped out of senior high school. I had a total of 101 students participating in this study. And for my data analysis, I used the IBM statistical package for social sciences version 25. And with my inferential statistics, a probability value of less than 0.05 was accepted as statistically significant. So moving on to the results section, looking first at the socio-demographic characteristics, we find that we had 70.3% of respondents falling within the 16 to 20 age group. So they accounted for the highest number of respondents. Then we see that more males than females took part in the study. We had 52.5% of respondents being male students. Then for the classes or the forms, we had a majority of our respondents coming from the Form 2 class. So they accounted for 43.6% of respondents. The next came from the Form 1 class. So as I stated earlier, a total of 101 students took part in this study, and they came mainly from the Greater Accra region, Ashanti region, and Central regions. We had the highest participants coming from Yasantua Senior High School, Bukwari, and Achimota Senior High School. So this is just a table showing the various schools that took part in the study, the number of students that took part. We have 24 other SHSs that were not represented in this table that contributed one participant each to the study as well. Then looking at the experience of the students with bullying victimization, we found that out of the 101 participants, 69 students admitted to having been bullied before. Then with concerning frequency of bullying victimization, we're going to focus mainly on the first row. So we find that out of the 69 students that took part in out of the 69 students that were bullied, 42 were bullied once or twice a month. 9 were bullied 3 times a month, 7 were bullied once a week, and 11 were bullied several times in a week. Then with bullying perpetration, majority of the students said they had never bullied any other student before, but 24 students admitted to having bullied someone once or twice a month. 5 people admitted to bullying at least 3 times in a month, and another 5 admitted to bullying others about once a week. Then we moved on to look at the gender differences in bullying victimization. We found that more males than females were victims of bullying. We had about 58% of our victims being male or being of the male gender. Yeah. Then this is we have a chart, a bar chart, which shows the gender differences in the type of bullying. So the lighter shade of green shows the male students, and the darker shade of green represents the female students. So from this bar chart, we can see that male students, the commonest type of bullying amongst the male students was through financial loss. Financial loss in the sense that they had their lunch monies or pocket monies taken away from them. And that was closely followed by bullying through coercion, so forcing their peers or their bullies, forcing them to do things they didn't want to do. And that was also closely followed by verbal bullying. Now, for the females, the commonest type of bullying was through the spreading of lies and false rumors, and that was closely followed by verbal bullying. I also want us to take note of the charts representing physical bullying, where we see that it was quite low, but relatively higher amongst the male students as compared to the female students. Then we looked at the prevalence of bully victims. I've already explained who bully victims are. So for this, we found that out of the 69 victims of bullying, 44 had never bullied any students before. So these 44 represent the pure victims. Now, again, we had 19 of the victims who had bullied others once or twice a month. We also had 3 people who had bullied others about 3 times in a month, and 3 who had bullied others about once a week. So we had a total of 25 students who were not just victims, but also perpetrated the acts of bullying, and so fall into our bully victim category. Then we also looked at the psychological impact of bullying perpetration, and mainly through the questionnaire, we looked at the fears that perpetrators may have about they themselves being bullied and their reaction in seeing others being bullied. So for that, we had a total of 34 perpetrators of bullying amongst the 101 participants, and out of the 34, we had 25. This included the 25 bully victims that we got to know of. And out of the 34, we found that 15 never had any fears about being bullied, whereas 3 students often had fears that they would be bullied. 3 perpetrators often had fears that they would be bullied. Then concerning their reactions to others being bullied, 12 watched whilst others were being bullied. 8 did nothing but felt they should have intervened. 3 tried to intervene. 5 did not intervene and felt bullying was okay. And 2 took part in the bullying. So the next bar chart just shows a graphical representation of what I just said. Then we move on to look at bullying victimization and depression. So we had about 20 students or 20 victims who had a score of 5 to 9. And we had 18 students who had a score of 0. This was followed by about 15 students who had a score of 1 to 4, and another 13 who had a score of 10 to 14, with the lower numbers, fewer students having scores of 15 to 19 and 20 to 27. When it came to establishing a relationship between bullying, perpetration, or victimization and the depression scores, we found that there was no significant association between the mean depression scores of bully perpetrators and bully victims of bullying. We had a p-value of 0.28, which was far larger than our significance level of 0.05. However, we found a significant difference in the mean depression scores recorded by male and female senior high school students who suffered from bullying. So, for male and female high school students, we had a p-value of 0.01, which was lower than our significance level, and so we felt it was significant enough. Okay, so these, for my discussion, I'll just be looking at the prevalence of bullying, the gender differences, the common methods, and be comparing it with other studies that were carried out by different people. So looking at the prevalence of bullying victimization, we calculated a bullying prevalence, a victimization prevalence of 68.3%, with a bullying perpetration prevalence of 33.7%. And this was much larger than what was found in a study done in Tunisia by Salih et al. They had a bullying victimization prevalence of 11.3 and a bullying perpetration prevalence of 16. A study done in Pakistan by Naveed et al. In 2020 also had quite a low bullying victimization prevalence. They had a prevalence of 18.6. However, Aqua et al. In 2014 conducted a study in Ghana, and they had a bullying victimization prevalence of 56%, which was also quite high. Then we looked at verbal bullying. Verbal bullying, though it was not the commonest type of bullying in among the sexes, it was fairly common in both sexes, and it agrees with a study done by Salih et al. In 2018, where they found verbal bullying to be the commonest type of bullying in the Tunisian schools, and it was especially common amongst their female students. It was also interesting to find that a quarter of our study participants also fell into the bully victim category. So a study by Naveed et al. Confirmed that bullying was distressful to not just the victim but also the perpetrator, and they showed that bullies tended to have more externalizing symptoms like anger and aggression, whereas victims of bullying had more internalizing symptoms like depression, anxiety, fear. Our study showed that perpetrators of bullying most of them did not show any empathy towards people who were being bullied, and majority of them also did not experience any fear about they themselves being bullied. Again, from the study, we found that there was no significant difference in the depression scores, as I stated earlier, between perpetrators and victims of bullying, but more depression occurred among female victims as compared to their male counterparts. Looking at the limitations of the study, this study used a self-administered questionnaire, and the questionnaire relied heavily upon the participants' ability to recall unpleasant situations and use that to answer the questions. So how well they were able to do that determined how the kind of answers we got. The study was also conducted online, again, as I stated, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the closure of schools. And that came with its problems because response rate was quite slow over the internet. And lastly, we used the Patient Health Questionnaire 9 to assess the depression of students, and this required them to look back several months back to the last time they were bullied. And we know the Patient Health Questionnaire 9 usually makes patients look back at least 2 weeks to determine if they have any depressive symptoms or depression symptoms. So in conclusion, bullying victimization is a problem among the youth in this country, and it's common in both genders. It um, also has the potential to give rise to the bully victim group, which who would then continue the vicious cycle of bullying. Um, Again, we saw that physical bullying is no longer one of the commonest types of bullying is sort of fading out. We are having other types of bullying like verbal bullying, bullying through social exclusion or spreading of rumors or lies, and bullying through um, financial loss. So students who have either engaged in bullying or have been victims of bullying, or both, are not exempt from the psychological effects of the act. All of them or any of them can experience some psychological effects from the act of bullying. And there is a need for us to control or limit its occurrence in our senior high schools. Anti-bullying programs are therefore needed in our senior high schools in order to put an end to the practice. So for my recommendations, I recommended that managers and administrators of senior high schools should review their anti-bullying programs if they had any, and if not, should adopt some anti-bullying programs in order to protect their students. I also recommended that the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education work hand in hand to ensure that senior high schools in the country have some kind of access to clinical psychologists to help them deal with the effects of bullying. And all acts of bullying should also be investigated appropriately in schools and the perpetrators severely punished. And this will serve as a deterrent to other students who may be thinking of engaging in the act. And campaigns against bullying in our senior high school should also be championed by the Ministry of Education and some NGOs in order to put a stop to the practice by creating awareness of some of the harmful effects of bullying. All right, this is just some a little acknowledgement and my references. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. The floor is now open for anybody who has questions. I've dropped in a link down below that you can join the Zoom and then ask questions, or you can leave your questions in the comment section. As I was wondering what we meant by the cyber bully. How were people getting bullied via internet?
Okay, so for cyberbullying, it could be people posting pictures of other people and writing mean comments under it, or just writing mean comments under pictures posted by students in general. So we had the bullies saying mean things about their fellow students, insulting them over the internet, posting pictures that probably they didn't want online, yes, and other things like that. So that's the cyberbullying aspect.
Okay. Yeah, so our finding was not able to reveal a correlation between bullying and then depression. The relationship is there, but only that the statistical significance is low.
Yeah.
So that is one thing we need to keep at the back of our minds if we begin to investigate people who have depression, especially students in SHS. I mean, definitely, I know everybody on this link has had a share of bullying at some point, but we all have different coping mechanisms. So there's some individuals who will not be able to cope with the tiniest amount of bullying. Yeah, so anybody has any question? Would like to take them now. But how different would our results been if it were not for the COVID?
Okay, so if it wasn't for the COVID, I mean, we would have gone to senior high schools to conduct the study, properly selected the students using like a probability sampling method. I don't know if the results we got would have been any different from what we got online, but I feel it will probably have been more statistically relevant if we had done it that way, if it wasn't for the COVID and we hadn't done it online.
Okay. But did we anticipate that the lockdown? I think this was done during the lockdown period, isn't it?
Yes, this was done during the lockdown period.
But would that have contributed to the expression of depression?
To
the way they express their depression, or would that have contributed to their depression in any way?
It could have contributed to their depression. That's why for the questionnaire I asked them to look. I wanted to establish a link with the bullying, not just them being at home or because of the lockdown period. So I asked them to look back several months, back to the time when they were in school and the last time they were bullied, probably, to try and establish that link. But I guess the depression could also have been from them being at home during the lockdown period.
Yeah, somebody is asking whether defamation is different from bullying, or it's a subset. What do you think? Hey, this is Dr. Sami Ohini.
Okay, I think defamation will fall under bullying, will be a subset of bullying, because with defamation it's sort of like the spreading of lies and false rumors about a person. So you're saying things that probably aren't true and you're defaming the person's character. Yeah, so I think it is a subset of bullying. It's not that different from bullying, but it's a type of bullying.
So more like the verbal one you talked about, the
yes,
verbal category.
Verbal, yes.
Well, it depends on which media the words come from. If they come from internet, then to be more of cyber. It's a cyber kind of bullying.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So those on Zoom, anybody has any question? Or you've never been bullied? Okay. Larissa, any final words? Dr. Seduyan say he's been bullied before, but he doesn't want to talk.
Actually, I just want to say